I shook her hand. I smiled at her. I thanked her for coming, and I had no idea she was sleeping with my husband. We were sitting at a dimly lit Italian restaurant downtown, the kind with candles on every table and couples leaning into each other like secrets were currency. He had insisted we go, said it would be good for us. She was already there when we arrived. He called her a colleague. She stood up when we approached. Confident, calm, almost amused. He put his hand on the small of my back and said, "This is the woman I've been telling you about." I thought he meant me. I thought he was proud. I didn't know he had been telling her about me for months. She complimented my dress. She asked how long we'd been married. She said, "You two seem solid." I laughed. Solid. Months later, when I found the messages on his phone, I realized that dinner wasn't networking. It wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. He brought me there so she could see me. And he wanted to see something too. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Claire. I was 35 years old the night I unknowingly shared a bottle of wine with the woman my husband was already in love with. And the worst part wasn't that he introduced us. It was why. He chose the restaurant. That should have been my first clue. He never chose restaurants. I was the planner. I made reservations. I read reviews. I checked menus in advance. But that week, he was oddly decisive. "Wear something nice," he said that afternoon. "Why?" "Just do." There was something almost eager in his voice. Not romantic eager. Nervous eager. I mistook it for effort. We had been drifting. Nothing dramatic. Just the quiet kind of distance that grows when conversations become logistics. Bills, groceries, schedules. He had been staying late at work more often. Saying he was mentoring someone new. Helping her get settled. I didn't think much of it. I believed him. When we walked in and I saw her already seated, something in my chest tightened. Just slightly. The way your body registers something before your brain does. She stood up. She was beautiful in a quiet way. Minimal makeup. Soft curls. Fitted black dress. She didn't look surprised to see me. That detail matters. She wasn't surprised. He leaned forward to hug her. Not a formal handshake. A hug. Brief, but familiar. "This is Emily," he said. Emily smiled at me like she already knew what my voice sounded like. "I've heard so much about you." That line didn't hit me until months later. I smiled back. Polite. Curious. "Oh. Hopefully good things." She tilted her head slightly. "Of course." He ordered wine before I could open the menu. He spoke for me. "She'll have the Pinot." He remembered my preference. That would have been sweet in another context, but now I remember how Emily's eyes flicked to him when he said it, like she was watching a performance. Dinner felt layered, conversations overlapping. He told stories about our vacations. She asked specific questions. "Was that the trip where you got sick on the second day?" I froze. How did she know that? He laughed quickly. "I tell stories." She smiled into her glass. I brushed it off. People talk at work. That's normal. But it wasn't just facts she knew. It was tone. It was texture. She asked me what I did when he worked late. She asked how I felt about his job stress. She asked if we'd ever considered moving. It felt less like small talk, more like data collection. Halfway through the meal, he squeezed my knee under the table. Hard. A warning. Or reassurance. I couldn't tell. Emily excused herself to the restroom at one point. When she stood up, he watched her. Not casually, not politely. He tracked her. I saw it. Just for a second. And when he realized I saw it, he reached for his glass. Too quickly. "Nice girl," I said lightly. He didn't answer right away. "She's ambitious," he replied finally. Ambitious. When she returned, she complimented our marriage. "You two seem very secure." It sounded like a statement. But her eyes lingered on him when she said it. He paid the bill. With our joint card. We left together. Outside, she hugged him again. Then she hugged me. She smelled like the same cologne he sometimes wore. That detail took months to connect. As we walked to the car, I asked casually, "So, What exactly do you two work on together? He hesitated. Projects. What kind? Work projects. I let it go. Because I trusted him. Because that's what you do when you're married and trying. That night, when we got into bed, he reached for me, initiated intimacy. Suddenly, eagerly, it felt almost urgent. At the time, I thought it was reconnection. Now I know it was something else. He wanted to prove something. Not to me, to himself, or maybe to her. I didn't know that night that I had just been measured, compared, evaluated, but I remember one moment clearly. As I drifted off to sleep, he rolled away from me and picked up his phone. The screen lit up his face in the dark. He smiled. Not at me, and I remember thinking, who are you smiling at? I didn't ask. I should have, because 3 months later, when I finally saw the messages, I realized that dinner wasn't a coincidence. It was an audition, and I was the only one who didn't know I was on stage. The next morning, I told myself I was overthinking. That's what women like me do. We don't accuse. We rationalize. She's just a coworker. You're being insecure. He chose you, but something about her eyes the night before refused to leave me alone. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't hatred. It was familiarity. She looked at him like she knew what he sounded like in private. And that thought stuck to me like smoke. The shift didn't happen immediately. It started small. He started taking his phone into the bathroom. Not dramatically, just casually. He angled the screen away when it lit up, muted notifications, started locking it when he never had before. One night, I was folding laundry on the couch when his phone buzzed beside me. He was in the shower. I wasn't trying to snoop. I really wasn't. But the screen lit up, and I saw her name, Emily. No emoji, no nickname, just her name. The preview showed only a few words before it disappeared. Last night was... Then the screen went dark. Last night was what? We were home last night, together. I stared at the blank screen like it might confess something. He walked in a minute later, towel around his waist. Did my phone go off? My heartbeat spiked. Yes. He didn't ask who. He picked it up immediately, walked into the bedroom, closed the door. That was new. Later that night, he was softer with me, more attentive, overcompensating. He asked how I was feeling. He initiated intimacy again. And here's the part that makes this worse. We weren't sexless. We weren't distant in that way. We had a physical relationship, consistent, normal, which is why the word he used about me later cut so deep. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that he felt divided, present, but elsewhere. A week later, he mentioned her again. Emily's having trouble with her apartment. Why was I hearing about her housing situation? She doesn't know if she should renew her lease. Is that your problem? I asked lightly. He shrugged. She asks for advice. He started saying her name too casually, like repetition would make it normal. Emily said this. Emily thinks that. Emily might leave the company. Then one night, he came home irritated. Not at me, just agitated. She's dramatic, he muttered while pouring himself a drink. She? I asked. He looked up too quickly. Work stuff. Work stuff. Always work stuff. 2 nights later, we were in bed when his phone buzzed again. Midnight. He reached for it before I could glance over. Turned his back to me. That's when something in me shifted. Not panic. Not accusation. Just awareness. He wasn't hiding something small. He was protecting something. The next morning, I checked our joint bank account. I don't know why. Instinct, maybe. There was a charge from the same Italian restaurant. 3 days after we went together. Same amount range. Dinner for 2. Not business lunch pricing. Dinner. Late evening. My stomach dropped. I waited until he left for work. I sat at the kitchen counter for a full hour before I did it. Before I picked up his spare iPad. It wasn't locked. He never thought about syncing devices. His messages were there. Not all of them, but enough. The thread with Emily wasn't empty. It wasn't innocent. It wasn't professional. It started harmless. Work banter. Memes. Inside jokes. Then it shifted. She sent a photo of herself in a dress. He responded, "You wore that to dinner?" Dinner. Not the team dinner, not work dinner, dinner. Then she wrote, "I liked watching you play husband." My breath caught. And then, the message that made my hands go numb. "She's colder than you described." He replied, "I told you. She hasn't touched me in months." The room went silent, except for my breathing. Cold. Hasn't touched me. Months. We had been intimate 3 nights earlier. He turned me into a narrative. I wasn't just being cheated on. I was being rewritten. I kept scrolling. She wrote, "I almost felt bad." He responded, "Don't. I'm stuck. Stuck. In a marriage he actively participated in. In a bed he willingly shared. In a life he publicly praised. I don't remember sitting down. I don't remember crying. I just remember staring at the timestamp, the night of the dinner. The message sent at 1:12 a.m. "She has no idea." He answered, "That's the point. That's when I understood something." He didn't just bring me to dinner. He staged it. He wanted her to see me. He wanted to confirm something. And whatever he confirmed, it wasn't about love. It was about power. But I hadn't seen the worst of it yet. Because buried further up in the thread was a message from before that dinner. And it changed everything. The messages didn't begin the week of the dinner. They didn't even begin the month before. They began 6 months earlier. 6 months of slow construction. 6 months of framing me. 6 months of building a version of our marriage that didn't exist. I kept scrolling upward, my pulse steady but heavy, like my body already understood the shape of what I was about to see. At first it looked harmless. Work complaints, late-night project frustrations, inside jokes about office politics. He wasn't flirting immediately. That's what made it worse. He was establishing intimacy slowly. Shared language, shared irritation, shared secrecy. Then the tone shifted. "She doesn't really get how demanding this job is." That was about me. I do understand his job. I had listened to every complaint for years, but now I was being reframed as someone who didn't understand him. 2 weeks later, "She's not very expressive." Expressive. Since when did calm equal absent? Another week passed. "She's more logical than emotional." That one stung in a way I couldn't explain. Logical isn't an insult, unless you're trying to contrast it with passion. And then the pivot came. "She's distant lately." Distant. I replayed those weeks in my mind. There were no arguments, no cold shoulders, no withheld affection, but there were late nights at work. There were longer showers. There were moments when he seemed mentally elsewhere. I hadn't pulled away. He had, but in his messages, the direction was reversed. I was withdrawing. I was fading. I was neglecting. And slowly, she began responding with sympathy. That must feel lonely, lonely. That word appeared again and again. He didn't say he was cheating. He said he was lonely. That's how narratives start. Then I found the first message that referenced me physically. "She hasn't wanted me in a while." The date on that message hit me like a physical blow. 3 days before that, I had initiated intimacy. He had kissed me back. He had pulled me closer. He had whispered my name. There was no hesitation, no reluctance. And yet, in this version of reality, I was withholding. He wasn't lying impulsively. He was curating. Scrolling further, I found something that tightened my throat. She asked him directly, "Why are you still there?" Still there. As if I were a temporary holding space. He replied, "It's complicated." Then, "She's safe, safe." That word sat heavier than cold. Safe is not romantic. Safe is not thrilling. Safe is dependable. And in his narrative, safe meant stagnant. "She's comfortable," he continued. "She doesn't question me." That line made everything click. He wasn't upset that I was cold. He was disappointed that I trusted him. Trust doesn't interrogate. Trust doesn't monitor. Trust assumes. And he mistook that for lack of passion. Then I found the message that led directly to the dinner. "I want you to meet her." Her response was immediate. "Why?" That question hung in the thread like a warning. His answer, "So you understand." "Understand what?" She pushed back. "Are you trying to hurt her?" He didn't say no. He said, "I need to see something." "See what?" "I need to see how I feel." That sentence is important. He didn't need to see how he felt about her. He needed to see how he felt about himself. Further down, "If you see her, you'll get why I feel stuck." Stuck. Not unloved, not rejected. Stuck. Stuck implies entrapment without visible chains. She hesitated. "I don't want to be part of something cruel." He reassured her. "It won't be cruel." That was a lie. Then, 3 days before the dinner, "She won't suspect anything." That line chilled me more than the affair itself, because it meant the dinner wasn't spontaneous. It was strategic. He was confident in my trust, confident in my composure, confident that I wouldn't react. And that's when I saw the message that redefined everything. "Let's see if she fights." Fights. He wasn't looking for clarity. He was looking for conflict. He wanted jealousy, possession, drama, because in his mind, love had to be volatile to feel alive. And when I didn't explode, when I didn't sense the tension, when I didn't accuse, he interpreted that as indifference. Scrolling further, I found the message sent minutes after we left the restaurant. "She's exactly how you described." Exactly how he described. He had prepped her. He had framed me before I even walked into the room. "She's calm. She's polite. She's too secure. Too secure." He turned stability into flaw. Then the worst line in the entire thread. "She won't compete." Compete. I closed my eyes. He needed competition. He needed to feel chosen. And if no one was fighting over him, he felt invisible. So he created a triangle, manufactured tension, engineered proximity, and used me as proof. Proof that he was undervalued. Proof that he deserved more. Proof that someone else could see what I supposedly couldn't. But then, buried in the thread from the night before the dinner, was the sentence that made my hands go cold. "If she doesn't react, I'll know." "Know what?" He never answered. He didn't need to. The test was never about love. It was about ego. He needed confirmation that he could stand between two women and control the emotional temperature of both. And I walked into that restaurant unaware, smiling, trusting, participating in my own humiliation. But there was still one piece missing, one detail that made this worse than emotional betrayal. Because the messages about intimacy, the ones where he claimed I was cold, those weren't exaggerations. They were deliberate distortions. And when I understood why he needed that lie, that's when the cruelty fully revealed itself. If he had only lied about feelings, maybe I could have categorized it as emotional weakness. If he had only said he felt lonely, maybe I could have rationalized it as immaturity. But he didn't just lie about emotions. He lied about my body, about what happened in our bed, about who initiated, about who pulled away, about who refused. And that kind of lie is surgical, because it rewrites memory. After finishing the dinner thread messages, I searched one word in the conversation: touch. The results populated instantly. There were too many. The first message appeared 3 months before the dinner. "She hasn't touched me in weeks." Weeks. I froze. I knew the exact week he was referring to, because that was the week we had taken a short weekend trip. We stayed in a hotel. We ordered room service. We made love twice. He held me afterward. There was no rejection, no hesitation, no discomfort. But in this thread, I had apparently withdrawn. I kept reading. "She's not into it anymore. Not into it." That phrase felt deliberate. Not "we're struggling," not "we're disconnected." He framed it as my lack of desire. She turns away. I had never turned away, but something started clicking. Sometimes he would pull back mid-kiss. Sometimes he would stop suddenly and say he was tired. Sometimes he would roll over without explanation. I had assumed stress, work, fatigue. Now I understood. He needed me to appear distant. Because if I wasn't, his justification collapsed. Scrolling further, I found the message that made my stomach drop. "I feel unwanted in my own house." Unwanted. I remembered that night vividly. I had tried to initiate. He had said he had an early meeting. I kissed his shoulder anyway. He smiled. He said, "Tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. But in his version, I was withholding. Then came the message that shattered any remaining doubt. She makes it feel like a chore. A chore. He was describing intimacy with me. But I remembered the last time clearly. There was laughter. There was closeness. There was softness. Nothing mechanical. Nothing reluctant. Unless he was performing. Unless he was detached. Unless he had already given his desire elsewhere. Then I found the thread that connected everything. She asked him, "Do you even sleep with her anymore?" His response, "Not really, not really." That phrase is genius in its vagueness. It doesn't mean never. It implies rarely. It suggests neglect. It invites sympathy, but it wasn't true. The date of that message was 2 days after we had been intimate. 2 days. And I knew exactly which night that was, because afterward, he had rested his forehead against mine and said, "I'm glad we're good. Good." The word feels cruel now. I scrolled down to see how far he took the lie. She doesn't initiate. That one hurt the most. Because I had, more than once. And every time he pulled back, I adjusted myself. I softened. I tried less. I didn't want to pressure him. But in his narrative, I was the one rejecting. I was the one frigid. And then, the message that made my vision blur. She's basically frigid. There it was, the word. The word he used about me. Frigid. He didn't say distant. He didn't say disconnected. He chose a word that makes a woman defective. Cold. Unresponsive. Sexually insufficient. And he used it to paint himself as deprived. The dates didn't align. The facts didn't align. But the story did, because the story served him. She responded, "That's not fair to you. Not fair to him. The man who was lying in our bed at night. The man who kissed me. The man who let me believe we were fine. He was crafting scarcity. Manufacturing deprivation. And using my body as proof." Then I saw something even more disturbing. A week before the dinner, she asked, "Are you sure you're not exaggerating?" She doubted him. She sensed something inconsistent. His response, "You don't see what I live with." Live with. As if I were a burden. As if our home were sterile. As if he were enduring me. And then, "She doesn't desire me." That line is what unlocked everything. Because desire cannot coexist with deceit. If he had already given his emotional vulnerability to someone else, if he had already framed me as cold, then every intimate moment with me wasn't connection. It was maintenance. It was camouflage. It was performance. He needed to continue sleeping with me. Because if he stopped completely, the lie would unravel. So he maintained just enough contact to avoid suspicion, and then told her it wasn't real. She just goes through the motions. I replayed our last intimate night in my mind. The way he touched my waist. The way he pulled me closer. The way he whispered my name. Was that performance? Was I the only one present? Or had he already rewritten me in his mind? Then came the message that made it undeniable. She doesn't even look at me the same. I stopped, because that part might have been true. Not because I was cold, but because I had started sensing something. Tiny fractures. Micro withdrawals. Moments when he seemed distant. My body responds to energy shifts before my brain does. Maybe I had been less animated, less expressive, but not because I didn't want him. Because something felt off, and instead of investigating the shift, he weaponized it. He turned intuition into accusation. He turned instinct into defect. Then she wrote, "So what are you doing about it?" And that's when I understood the double betrayal. He replied, "I'm trying. He meant trying with her, trying to feel alive, trying to create spark, trying to escape the narrative he built. Because in his story, I was the problem, which meant she was the solution. And that's when it became clear. He wasn't cheating because I was cold. He was calling me cold because he was cheating. The lie didn't justify the affair. The affair required the lie. He had to degrade my sexuality to protect his own ego. He had to diminish my warmth to excuse his hunger. He had to rewrite intimacy to erase guilt. Because if he admitted we were still connected, then he wasn't neglected. He was greedy. And greed isn't sympathetic. But loneliness is. Frustration is. Deprivation is. He built a character version of me. One that was safe, predictable, sexually unresponsive. And then he invited her into that script. And she believed it. But the timestamps didn't lie. The calendar didn't lie. My memory didn't lie. We had intimacy. We had connection. We had moments. He simply needed those moments to mean less. Because if they meant something, then what he was doing was cruelty, not necessity. And then I found the message that prepared me for what was coming next. If she ever finds out, she'll say I'm the villain. He knew. He knew he was distorting. He knew he was triangulating. He knew he was constructing emotional alibis. But what he didn't anticipate was that I would read every word, and that I would understand the strategy. He wasn't escaping a cold marriage. He was manufacturing emotional starvation and feeding on the validation that followed. But there was still something I hadn't processed, because the lie about intimacy, the rewriting of my body, the framing of my desire, all of it led to one inevitable moment: confrontation. And when I finally asked him about the word, frigid, his reaction was not defensive. It was something far worse. It was calculated. And that's when the final mask slipped. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the iPad. I didn't storm into his office. I waited. That night, I made dinner like I always did. I asked about his day. I listened. I watched him chew. I watched his face when he looked at me. I wondered how long he had been looking at me like I was background noise. When we finished eating, I said calmly, "We need to talk." He didn't tense. He didn't ask why. He just sighed. Like he was tired. That detail matters. Because guilty people panic. Prepared people exhale. We sat on the couch. I handed him the iPad. I didn't say anything. He stared at the screen for 3 full seconds. Then his jaw tightened. Not shock. Recognition. He didn't ask how I found it. He didn't ask how much I saw. He asked one thing. How long have you been reading? Like the betrayal wasn't the messages. It was my awareness. I read enough. Silence. Then he leaned back and said something I will never forget. I knew this would happen eventually. Eventually. Not if. Eventually. So you admit it? I asked. He didn't answer directly. He said, "It's not what you think." I almost laughed, because that's the most predictable sentence in history. "What exactly do you think I think?" I asked. He hesitated. Then, "You're focusing on the wrong part." "The wrong part. The wrong part is not the affair?" I asked quietly. He closed his eyes for a second. It wasn't serious. Months. Messages. Voice memos. Dinners. Testing me. It wasn't serious? I repeated. It wasn't real. Not real. My throat tightened. So what was it? He leaned forward. And this is where the absurdity began. It was clarity. Clarity. He said he needed to understand how he felt. He said he needed perspective. He said he felt invisible in our marriage. Invisible. I stared at him. You told her I don't touch you. He shrugged slightly. You don't. The audacity of that sentence made my hands shake. We were together 3 nights ago. That doesn't count. Doesn't count. What does that even mean? He exhaled like I was being difficult. It's routine. Routine. As if intimacy was a chore I completed. As if connection had to be theatrical to be real. You told her I haven't wanted you in months. He looked down at his hands. I meant emotionally. No. He didn't. The messages were clear. You said I was cold. He didn't deny that. He said, "You are." That word. Again. I felt something inside me detach. Not heartbreak. Clarity. I planned a surprise dinner for you 2 weeks ago. You always plan things. He replied flatly. That's not passion. Passion. He needed fire. Drama. Jealousy. Possession. You brought me to dinner with her. He didn't look ashamed. He said, I needed her to see. To see what? That I wasn't exaggerating. The room felt distorted. You needed her to see me. Yes. Like it was obvious. You wanted validation. I wanted confirmation. A confirmation of what? That I wasn't crazy for wanting more. More. I felt my voice get quieter. You could have talked to me. I did. When? You never fight for me. Fight for him. There it was. You wanted me to explode. I wanted you to care. I did care. Not like that. He leaned forward. You sat there that night. Calm. Polite. Comfortable. You didn't even flinch. I stared at him. I trusted you. He shook his head. You were complacent. Complacent. You mistook trust for indifference. No, he said. I mistook comfort for love. And suddenly I understood the true cruelty. He didn't cheat because I was cold. He cheated because I was stable. He needed volatility to feel desired. He needed contrast. He needed someone who would fight over him. And when I didn't, he decided that meant I didn't value him. You lied about our intimacy. He didn't deny it. He said, it felt easier. Easier. Easier than what? Than telling her I wasn't ready to leave. There it was. The truth. He needed her invested. He needed me secure. So he lied to both of us. He leaned back again and said something that shifted everything. I wanted to see who I felt more alive with. Alive? And? He didn't answer immediately. Because the answer was ugly. Because the answer exposed him. You didn't react, he said finally. You didn't fight. I stared at him. I wasn't auditioning, but he was. He turned our marriage into a comparison chart, and when I didn't compete, he labeled me cold. But then I asked the question that cracked him. Why did you initiate with me that night? He froze. The restaurant night. He swallowed. That wasn't about her. Yes, it was. Silence. He looked away. He didn't deny it. He needed to prove he still could. That he still had access. That he still had control. He wasn't confused. He was performing. And the worst part? He thought the dinner made him powerful. But it made him small. And when I stood up, when I picked up my keys, when I said, I'm leaving, he panicked for the first time. Don't overreact. Overreact. After months of calculated humiliation, you brought me to dinner with your mistress. I didn't think you'd ever know. That sentence landed like a slap. He didn't feel guilty. He felt unlucky, and that's when I realized something deeper than betrayal. He didn't cheat because I was lacking. He cheated because he needed to feel chosen. And the only way he could manufacture that feeling was by creating a triangle. But what he didn't expect was that once I saw it clearly, I wouldn't fight. I would walk. And the moment I walked toward the door, he said the one thing that made everything click. Don't make me choose. Make him choose. As if I had been competing the whole time. As if this was a game. As if the humiliation was mutual. That's when I understood. He never wanted to leave. He wanted to hover. He wanted 2 reflections. 2 validations. 2 mirrors. And I had unknowingly stood in one of them. But now, the mirror was cracked, and he could finally see himself. When I confronted him about the messages, he didn't panic. He didn't deny immediately. He didn't explode. He observed me. That was the first thing I noticed. He was studying my reaction the same way he had studied me at that dinner. Measuring, calculating, testing. I said the word out loud. Frigid. He didn't flinch. He didn't look shocked that I knew. Instead, he exhaled slowly. Why were you going through my phone? There it was. Not shame, not guilt. Redirection. The conversation wasn't about betrayal. It was about my access to the truth. I wasn't looking, I said. The message preview popped up. He tilted his head. You're exaggerating. Exaggerating. That word again. It's subtle. It doesn't deny. It reframes. You said I was frigid. He shrugged. I was venting. Venting. As if reducing my sexuality to a defect was casual frustration. As if misrepresenting our intimacy was harmless release. You told her I don't touch you. He didn't respond immediately. He looked at the floor. Then at me. Then back at the floor. It feels like you don't. Feels. Not fact. Not reality. Emotion. Manipulation hides inside feelings. We had sex 2 nights before you said that. Silence. He swallowed. That doesn't mean I feel wanted. And that was the pivot. He wasn't arguing facts. He was arguing interpretation. He didn't need to deny intimacy. He just needed to diminish it. You initiated, I said. I didn't reject you. He ran his hands through his hair. It's not about frequency. Then what was it about? Because every message suggested absence, starvation, deprivation. But now the goalpost moved. It's about passion, he said. Passion. Another vague word. Impossible to measure. Easy to weaponize. So, I'm not passionate enough? I asked. He hesitated. Sometimes you're just calm. The same word he used in the thread. Too calm. Too secure. Too stable. It wasn't that I was cold. It was that I wasn't volatile. And volatility, apparently, was his proof of desire. I don't scream or cry when you leave a room, I said. He looked at me like I had finally understood something. You don't react. There it was. The test. The dinner. The triangle. The messages. The word frigid wasn't about sex. It was about reaction. He needed chaos to feel chosen. And if I reacted? I asked quietly. He didn't answer immediately. But his silence said enough. If I had thrown a glass at that dinner, if I had stormed out, if I had accused her, he would have felt desired, possessed, important. Instead, I was composed, and in his mind, composure meant indifference. So you lied, I said. I didn't lie. You told her I refused you. He inhaled sharply. I felt refused. He was brilliant at this. He didn't deny the message. He reinterpreted the emotion. You said I haven't touched you in weeks. That's how it feels. The word feels is a shield. You can't argue with someone's feelings. But feelings don't rewrite timestamps. Why did you need her to think I was cold? I asked. He looked away. That's when the mask cracked. Because that question wasn't about sex. It was about motive. He didn't answer. So I kept going. Why did you need her to believe you were neglected? He finally spoke. Because I was unhappy. Unhappy. But unhappy doesn't require distortion. Unhappy doesn't require fabrication. Unhappy requires honesty. You could have said that to me. He laughed softly. And that laugh was colder than any word he used about me. You wouldn't have understood. There it was. The superiority. The quiet arrogance. The belief that I was too stable to comprehend his chaos. I understand betrayal, I said. He stiffened. I didn't betray you. He said it calmly, as if the word betrayal required physical proof. You told another woman I don't satisfy you. I didn't say that. You implied it. That's your interpretation. He was slippery. Never fully accountable. Never fully denying. Floating in gray space where guilt dissolves. Did you sleep with her? I asked. The room felt smaller. He paused longer this time. Then, that's not the point. That answer is always the point. Did you? He stared at me, and in that stare, I saw calculation again. He was measuring risk, weighing confession against denial. We crossed lines. Crossed lines. Not yes, not no. Strategic ambiguity. When? Silence. Before or after you told her I was frigid? His jaw tightened. You're being dramatic. Dramatic, the final refuge. When facts corner them, they call emotion excessive. I'm asking for truth. You're twisting this. Twisting. Another deflection. But something had shifted. His tone wasn't confident anymore. It was defensive. Because the timeline trapped him. The intimacy we had. The messages he sent. The dinner he orchestrated. The word he chose. He needed me to remain calm. Because if I stayed calm, he could keep reframing. But something inside me was no longer calm. Not hysterical. Not explosive. Just awake. You wanted me to fight, I said. He blinked. That's ridiculous. You wanted me to compete. He shook his head. You're paranoid. But his breathing changed. You told her, let's see if she fights. Silence. That was the moment. The slip. Because he hadn't expected me to see that part. His shoulders dropped. You weren't supposed to read everything. Not denial, not remorse. Just irritation at exposure. So, this was a test? I asked. He rubbed his forehead. I needed to know if you still cared. I married you. That's not the same. What is the same? I asked. Chaos? Tears? Scenes? He didn't answer. Because yes, that's what he wanted. Intensity, reaction, validation through volatility. He had engineered a triangle to provoke proof of passion. And when I didn't perform, he rewrote me. Frigid, cold, unresponsive. So he could feel justified in seeking heat elsewhere. Did you love her? I asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. No, that answer came fast. Too fast. And yet you humiliated me for her. I didn't humiliate you. You introduced me to her. That wasn't intentional. Every choice had been intentional. Every message curated. Every narrative crafted. He wasn't clumsy. He was strategic. But the strategy had one flaw. He underestimated what happens when the person you call calm stops being calm internally. Because composure is not ignorance. It's restraint. And restraint has limits. You don't get to rewrite my body, I said. He frowned. What? You don't get to tell someone I refused you when I didn't. He exhaled sharply. You're overanalyzing. No. I'm remembering. And remembering is powerful. Because memory doesn't bend to narrative. I wasn't frigid, I said. I never said you were. You did. He looked tired now. Cornered. You're focusing on one word. One word. As if words don't matter. As if language isn't weaponry. You made me defective, I said quietly. That's when his face changed. Because that was never the intention. He didn't see it as degradation. He saw it as justification. And that's worse. I needed someone to talk to, he said. About my body? Silence. He had no answer that didn't expose him. Because the truth was simple. He wanted admiration. He wanted intensity. He wanted drama. And when our marriage felt stable, he mistook stability for stagnation. So he destabilized it himself. The confrontation didn't end with shouting. It ended with distance. Physical distance. He slept on the couch that night. Not because I told him to, but because something invisible had cracked. And once a narrative collapses, it doesn't rebuild the same way. The next morning he acted normal. Coffee, work emails, routine. As if the word frigid had never been said. As if the dinner hadn't been engineered. As if my body hadn't been rewritten. But something had changed. I wasn't calm anymore. Not externally, but internally. And internal shifts are irreversible. Because once you see the strategy, you can't unsee it. Once you understand that you weren't neglected, you were manipulated, everything reframes. He thought the confrontation would reset the board, that I would process, cry, maybe forgive. What he didn't realize was that something far more dangerous than anger had formed, clarity. And clarity doesn't scream. Clarity plans. And what I did next, he never saw coming. The thing about clarity is, it doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like your body finally stops arguing with your brain. I didn't wake up the next morning ready to scream or throw things or demand a confession. I woke up quiet. Not defeated quiet. Focused quiet. He was in the kitchen like nothing happened. Tapping his phone with one thumb. Humming under his breath, the same sweatshirt he always wore, like we were still inside the old version of our marriage. And for a split second, I almost fell for it. Almost. Because normal is seductive when your nervous system is exhausted. But then I remembered the word, frigid, and the messages, and the way he said, you weren't supposed to read everything, like the issue was my eyesight, not his betrayal. He looked up. Morning. I nodded. Morning. That was it. No accusation, no argument. And he visibly relaxed. That part was almost funny. How quickly he calmed down when I didn't perform pain for him. He liked me calm. He liked me contained. Calm meant controllable. He poured coffee like he was auditioning for a commercial husband. Do you want some? I watched him, and I realized something that made my stomach turn. He wasn't trying to fix what he broke. He was trying to restore the setting where he could keep breaking it. I'm good, I said. He took a sip and leaned against the counter. Casual. We don't have to make this a big thing. There it was. The first attempt to shrink the truth. It's already a big thing, I said. He blinked. like he wasn't used to me disagreeing without apologizing. "It was just messages," he said. "You're acting like I—" "Don't," I cut in. My voice was steady. "Don't minimize it." His mouth tightened. He didn't like that tone. Not because it was loud, because it was final. He tried again, softer. "I said I was venting. You were building a story," I said. "About me. About our marriage. For her." He scoffed. "You're making it sound calculated." I stared at him. He stared back. And neither of us moved. Because we both knew exactly what it was. Calculated. He shifted first. "Okay," he said, like he was conceding something generous. "I shouldn't have said those things." "Shouldn't have." "Still not." I lied. "Still not." "I betrayed you." "Still not." "I used you." "I want the truth," I said. He looked away. The truth wasn't a thing he offered. It was a thing he guarded. "I told you," he said. "We crossed lines." I waited. He didn't fill in the rest. So I asked the question I hadn't asked out loud yet. Not fully. Not as a gotcha. As a boundary. "Is she still in our life?" His head snapped up. "What? Is she still in our life?" I repeated. "Are you still talking to her?" He hesitated. Just long enough to give himself away, and that tiny pause did more damage than any confession. "You're interrogating me," he said. I let out a breath through my nose, almost a laugh, because it was so predictable. A man caught building a lie will always pretend the crime is the questioning. "I'm protecting myself," I said. He stepped closer, voice lowering like we were negotiating. "I'll stop talking to her." I held his gaze. "That's not an answer." He swallowed, and then he did something that would have worked on the old me. He reached for my hand, like touch could erase what he wrote about my body, like a warm palm could rewrite cold words. I pulled my hand back before he could make contact. His face changed. Not sad, not regretful, annoyed. The second the comfort maneuver failed. "You're being stubborn," he snapped. There it was. Not remorse. Entitlement. "I'm being awake," I said. He rolled his eyes. "So, what do you want? A divorce?" The way he said it was almost mocking. Like that option was dramatic, childish, unrealistic. Like he still believed I needed him more than I needed peace. I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, I didn't want a divorce. I wanted the marriage I thought I had, but I wasn't married to that. I was married to a man who could introduce me to his affair partner and call it a coincidence. I was married to a man who needed my humiliation to feel alive. So I said the only thing that mattered. "I want to leave the story you keep writing about me." He stared. Then he laughed. Sharp, dismissive. "You're spiraling." And in that moment, I understood something that felt freeing. He would never see me clearly. Not because I was unlovable, because seeing me clearly would force him to see himself clearly. And that was the one thing he refused. So I stopped trying to convince him. That day, I didn't confront him again. I didn't ask for more truth. I didn't beg for closure. I did something far more dangerous to a man like him. I went quiet strategically. I went upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand. And I started documenting. Screenshots. Everything. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted reality. Because I knew what would come next. He would rewrite. He would tell people I was dramatic, insecure, controlling, cold. He would say I invaded his privacy. He would say I was looking for problems. He would say anything except, I betrayed my wife. So I built a file of reality, not a dramatic scrapbook. A record. Dates, times, names, the messages. The thread where he said he wanted to see if I'd fight. The lines that made my stomach flip. Not because they were romantic, because they were cruel. Then I did something else. I checked our accounts. Not because I suspected theft, but because betrayal always has a financial shadow. And sure enough, there it was. Small charges at first. Coffee shops I'd never been to. A boutique gym membership. Her neighborhood. Ride shares at odd hours. The kind of spending that looks innocent until you're the one who knows the context. My chest tightened. I wasn't just being humiliated emotionally. I was underwriting it. I sat there, staring at the screen. and I felt something I didn't expect. Not rage, not heartbreak. Disgust. A clean, icy disgust that made my skin feel too tight. Because here's the double betrayal. He was sleeping next to me like a husband, while selling a story about me to another woman like I was an obstacle. I wasn't his partner in that story. I was his excuse. I called a lawyer that afternoon. Not a dramatic divorce lawyer montage. Just a calm phone call with my voice steady, like I was ordering takeout. The receptionist asked me my name, and I almost laughed at how normal it sounded. Because nothing about my life felt normal anymore. When I met the lawyer, she didn't gasp. She didn't make it theatrical. She just asked questions. Practical questions. And with every question, my brain clicked into place more. Do you have proof? Yes. Do you share accounts? Yes. Do you feel safe? I paused. Safe. He wasn't punching walls. He wasn't threatening me with his fists, but he was capable of escalation. And I remembered how easily he flipped from soft voice to sharp tone when I pulled my hand away. I feel like he'll punish me socially, I said quietly. The lawyer nodded, like she'd heard that sentence 1,000 times. Then we plan accordingly, she said. Plan. That word felt like oxygen. That week, I moved like I was living a double life. Because I was. Outwardly, normal wife. Inwardly, woman building an exit. I packed a small bag with documents, passport, birth certificate, social security card, a spare set of keys. I gathered sentimental items that couldn't be replaced. Not furniture, not decor. The irreplaceable pieces. He didn't notice. Or maybe he did, and thought I'd never actually leave. He started love bombing on day 3. Not flowers, not apology letters, convenience gestures. He cleaned the kitchen dramatically. He offered to cook dinner. He put his phone face down like that meant something. He started saying we again in sentences where he'd been saying I for months. And the wildest part? For a moment, my body wanted to accept it, because consistency is addictive when you've been starved. But then I remembered how he introduced me to her, how he wanted to watch me fight, how he labeled me frigid to make his betrayal sound like survival. So I stayed steady, and he started to panic. Not outwardly. Subtly, he began asking where I was going. Not in a cute way, in a tracking way. What time will you be back? Who are you meeting? Why didn't you answer? He used to ignore my emotions. Now he was obsessed with my location, because he could feel the control slipping. One night, I came home and found him sitting on the couch, the lights off, just the TV glow flickering across his face. My stomach dropped, not because I thought he'd hurt me, because I recognized the vibe, the staged atmosphere, the we need to talk setting. He patted the cushion beside him. Sit. I didn't. I stood by the doorway like I was visiting my own life. He stared up at me. You've been acting weird. I let out a slow breath. I've been acting honest, I said. He stood, suddenly defensive. So what, you're leaving? The old me would have answered softly, would have explained, would have tried to make him understand. This version of me understood something else. If I announced my exit too early, he'd rewrite it before I could execute it. So I didn't give him a speech. I gave him a line. I'm not competing for my own marriage, I said. His face hardened. You're blowing this up. No, I said. You built this. I'm just walking through what you built. He stepped closer, voice tight. You're really going to throw away 10 years over a few texts? And there it was. The final trick. Make the betrayal small. Make the marriage heavy. Make me feel irrational. I didn't answer. I walked past him, up the stairs, into the bedroom, and I locked the door. Not for drama, for boundary, for reality. The next morning I left early. I didn't tell him where I was going. I didn't explain. I went to sign papers. And when it became real, official, ink on a page, I felt something I never expected to feel in the middle of a marriage collapse. Relief, not happy relief. Grief was still there, but relief that my life didn't have to be a stage for his appetite anymore. When he was served, he didn't call crying. He didn't call apologizing. He called angry. How could you do this to me? To him. Always to him. I hung up without replying, because for the first time in years, I didn't feel responsible for managing his emotions. And that was the real ending. Not the paperwork, not the separation, not even the betrayal. The ending was that I stopped being the person he could rewrite. And that's why, even though I was terrified, I knew I was going to make it. Because I wasn't disappearing anymore. I was leaving. The first night I slept alone in my new place. It was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. No humming refrigerator I recognized. No familiar creak in the hallway. No version of him existing behind a door. Just space. And for the first time in months, my body wasn't bracing. That's how I knew I made the right decision. Because even before the betrayal, I had been bracing. Bracing for distance. Bracing for subtle shifts. Bracing for that invisible comparison I didn't know was happening behind my back. I lay on the mattress, temporary, borrowed, and stared at the ceiling. And I said the word out loud. Frigid. It sounded almost absurd now. Small. Weak. Like something insecure men use when they can't admit they're bored with stability. Because here's the truth, no one tells you. I was never cold. I was safe. I was consistent. I was loyal, and those qualities don't excite people addicted to friction. In the weeks after the separation, the narrative spread exactly how I predicted it would. He told mutual friends we had grown apart. He told a few people I had become emotionally distant. He didn't use the word frigid publicly. He wasn't reckless, he was curated. But the undertone was there. She wasn't affectionate. She wasn't engaged. She changed. It's fascinating how betrayal always requires a personality adjustment in the victim. They never say, I wanted more attention. They say, she wasn't enough. But something strange happened. When I stopped defending myself, the story lost oxygen. Because here's the part he didn't anticipate. I didn't retaliate. I didn't blast screenshots. I didn't post cryptic quotes. I didn't wage war. I moved. And movement is louder than argument. He tried to contact me a few times. At first it was logistics, bank accounts, paperwork, property division. Then it became reflective. I've been thinking. That sentence almost made me laugh. He had years to think. But now that the stage was empty, he missed the audience. I didn't mean to hurt you, he wrote once. That message stayed unread. Not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. Because intent doesn't erase impact. And acknowledgement doesn't restore respect. Months passed. And here's what I noticed. My nervous system recalibrated. I stopped checking my phone constantly. I stopped analyzing tone shifts. I stopped wondering if I was too calm. I stopped performing passion to prove I cared. And that's when something unexpected surfaced. Desire. Real desire. Not desperate desire. Not competitive desire. Not performative intensity, just quiet, grounded attraction to my own life again. I started working out. Not revenge body workouts, strength workouts. I wanted to feel my body as mine again, not as a narrative device someone else weaponized. I cut my hair, not dramatically, just enough to feel the shift. I redecorated slowly, piece by piece. Nothing rushed, nothing symbolic, just intentional. The first time someone flirted with me after the divorce, I felt confused. Because I realized I had internalized his narrative longer than I thought. Was I distant? Was I hard to read? Was I not expressive enough? But then the man said something simple. You're steady. And I almost cried, because steady had once been twisted into flaw. But in the right hands, steady is rare. He never understood that. And that's okay. He didn't need to. The real turning point came when I ran into him unexpectedly. It wasn't dramatic, no slow motion, no soundtrack, just a grocery store aisle. He froze. I didn't. He looked thinner, not physically fragile, just smaller, like a man who lost his mirror. Hey, he said, awkward. Hey, I replied. There was a pause. Not heavy, not painful, just neutral. And in that neutrality, I realized something powerful. He no longer defined my temperature. He studied my face like he was trying to measure something, looking for cracks, looking for regret, looking for longing. There was none. "How have you been?" he asked. "Good," I said, and I meant it. He nodded slowly. "She didn't work out," he added casually. There it was. The subtle invitation. The reopening. The test. I smiled. Not warm, not cold, just present. "I hope you figure out what you're looking for," I said, and I walked away. No spike of adrenaline. No shaking hands. No urge to turn back. Just forward motion. That's when I understood the final layer of the betrayal. It wasn't about sex. It wasn't even about the other woman. It was about narrative control. He needed to be the desired one, the deprived one, the misunderstood one. And for years, I had unknowingly supported that script. Not anymore. He once said I didn't react, that I was too calm, too secure, too composed, and he mistook that for absence of love. But love doesn't have to scream, and loyalty doesn't have to compete. He needed turbulence to feel alive. I needed respect to feel safe. And those two things were never compatible. If I could go back to the version of myself sitting at that dinner table, smiling politely across from his mistress, I wouldn't whisper warnings. I wouldn't say, "Leave sooner." I'd say this: "You're not cold. You're clear." And clarity terrifies people who thrive in confusion. Now when I think about that word, frigid, it doesn't sting. It feels like evidence. Evidence of projection. Evidence of insecurity. Evidence that I was stable in a way he could never match. And stability, to someone addicted to emotional drama, feels like emptiness. But it isn't. It's strength. The final irony? After everything, after the humiliation, after the rewriting, after the triangulation, I didn't become colder. I became more selective. And that's not the same thing. I still love deeply. I still desire fully. I still show up completely. But I no longer audition. I no longer compete. And I will never again let someone rewrite my body to justify their appetite. Because here's the truth that took me years to understand. You don't have to be louder to be loved. You don't have to be dramatic to be desired. And you don't have to burn to prove you're warm. He said I was frigid, but the only thing that froze was the moment I stopped believing him. And once that thawed, I was unstoppable.